If a child ever walks through a storm to find a stranger instead of the police, it's because the world has already taught her who won't come. The rain fell so hard that night it blurred the city into streaks of silver and black, turning every streetlight into a lonely halo floating above soaked pavement. I had lived in Manhattan my entire life, but I had never seen the city look so empty. Midnight usually belonged to people chasing dreams or running from mistakes. That night, it belonged to a little girl carrying a faded brown teddy bear almost as big as her chest. Her sneakers splashed through puddles as she climbed the long stone staircase leading to the most feared estate in the city. Every instinct should have told her to turn around. Instead, she knocked. Once. Twice. Then a third time, her tiny fist making almost no sound against the massive oak door. The security cameras noticed her before anyone else did. Inside the mansion, dozens of monitors flickered with images of iron gates, marble courtyards, and silent gardens shimmering beneath the rain. One screen showed nothing more dangerous than a child standing completely alone. She wasn't crying. That was the unsettling part. Children who cried still believed someone would comfort them. This little girl simply waited, hugging her teddy bear tighter each time the wind blew against her soaked jacket. A guard opened the door just enough to look outside. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion almost immediately. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" he asked gently. The little girl slowly shook her head. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks, and raindrops slid from her eyelashes, but her blue eyes never left the hallway behind him. "I need to see Mr. Moretti," she whispered. The guard frowned. Almost nobody asked for Adrian Moretti by name. Adults usually stumbled over the words, speaking with hesitation or fear. Hearing it from someone who couldn't have been older than 6 felt strangely unreal. "Why do you need him?" the guard asked. The little girl swallowed. "Because Mommy said if she didn't come home, I had to find the man with the black wolf." The guard's face lost every trace of color. Around Adrian Moretti's organization, the Black Wolf wasn't a nickname people used casually. It was an old symbol known only to those who had earned his trust or owed him everything. No ordinary maid. No ordinary family. The guard hesitated only a second before speaking into the radio clip to his shoulder. Upstairs, Adrian had been reviewing financial reports in the quiet library when his chief of security interrupted him. "Boss, there's someone asking for you." Adrian didn't bother looking up. "Tell them to come back tomorrow. It's a little girl." Silence settled across the room. Adrian finally closed the folder in front of him. "A little girl? She says she's looking for the man with the black wolf." For the first time that night, Adrian stood without saying another word. Minutes later, he entered the grand foyer where polished marble reflected the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. The little girl looked impossibly small beneath the towering ceiling. Her wet jacket dripped onto the expensive floor, yet nobody seemed to notice. Adrian stopped several feet away. His calm gray eyes studied every detail: the oversized backpack, the worn teddy bear, the exhaustion hidden behind a child's brave expression. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Lily Carter." "And where is your mother tonight?" Lily's fingers tightened around the teddy bear until the fabric wrinkled beneath her hands. She looked straight into his eyes with a courage no child should ever have needed. "My mommy has been missing for 3 days." The room fell completely silent. Then she reached into her pocket and carefully placed a small silver key on the marble floor between them. "Before she disappeared, she told me only you would understand why this matters." Adrian did not reach for the silver key immediately. Instead, he looked at Lily the way experienced men study impossible situations, searching for the one detail that makes everything else make sense. The foyer remained silent except for the soft tapping of rain against the tall windows. Finally, he bent down, picked up the small key, and turned it slowly between his fingers. It was old, worn smooth around the edges, with a tiny black wolf engraved near the handle. That symbol had disappeared from his organization almost 15 years earlier, long before most of his current employees had joined him. Only a handful of people even knew it had ever existed. "Who gave this to your mother?" Adrian asked. Lily shrugged. She always kept it on a necklace under her shirt. She told me never to touch it unless something bad happened. Adrian's expression remained calm, but his mind had already begun connecting memories he had not visited in years. Emily Carter. He quietly repeated the name to himself after one of the guards retrieved the personnel records from the household management office. 27 years old. Housekeeping contractor. Employed for nearly 11 months. Excellent performance reviews. Never late. Never absent. No disciplinary reports. The kind of employee nobody noticed because she did everything right. Adrian stared at the photograph attached to her file. Blonde hair tied back neatly. Kind blue eyes. Plain gray uniform. Nothing about her suggested she belonged anywhere near the dangerous secrets carried by the silver key now resting in his hand. "When did you last see your mother?" he asked. 3 mornings ago," Lily answered. "She kissed my forehead before work and told me to be brave if she came home late." "Who has been taking care of you?" "Mrs. Dawson from next door. Mommy asked her before she left." Adrian exchanged a brief glance with his chief of security. "Verify that." Less than 20 minutes later the report came back. Everything Lily had said was true. Emily had left for work at 7:30 that morning. She had never arrived. Her employee badge had not been used at any entrance. Her phone stopped sending a signal less than 40 minutes after she left her apartment. There had been no activity on her bank account. No messages. No medical emergencies. No airline tickets. No indication that she had planned to disappear. It was as though she had quietly stepped out of the world. Adrian closed the folder. Missing adults usually left traces. Emily had left none. That bothered him more than he cared to admit. He looked toward Lily, who had fallen asleep on one end of the enormous leather sofa, still clutching the faded teddy bear with both hands. Even in her sleep, her tiny fingers refused to let it go. One of the housekeepers approached with a warm blanket, carefully covering the little girl without waking her. Adrian watched the scene longer than anyone expected. "Has she eaten?" he asked. "Only half a sandwich since yesterday afternoon," the housekeeper replied softly. Adrian nodded once. "Prepare the guest suite beside the east garden. Stock the kitchen with whatever children her age usually eat. Buy clothes tomorrow morning. Make sure she never feels like a visitor." His staff looked surprised but immediately began moving. As everyone quietly left the room, Adrian remained standing beside the sleeping child. His eyes drifted back toward Emily's personnel file lying open on the marble table. A woman who cleaned empty rooms. A child carrying an obsolete symbol. A silver key that should not exist anymore. None of it fit together. Yet every instinct he had spent decades sharpening whispered the same warning. Emily Carter had not vanished by accident. Somewhere beneath an ordinary life, she had unknowingly stumbled across a secret that someone believed should never be found. Morning arrived without sunlight. Thick gray clouds still covered the skyline, making the city feel as though time itself had decided to stand still. Adrian had slept less than an hour, yet exhaustion never reached his face. He stood inside the private operations room watching dozens of digital maps glow across the wall while fresh reports continued arriving every few minutes. Every hospital had been contacted. Every transportation hub had been reviewed. Every security camera along Emily Carter's usual route had been examined frame by frame. The results remained exactly the same. Emily appeared on one street camera at 7:38 in the morning carrying a reusable coffee cup and a navy blue shoulder bag. She smiled politely at an elderly man walking his dog. She stopped at a crosswalk. She disappeared around the corner. She was never seen again. Adrian replayed the footage several times. Nothing looked unusual. No panic. No argument. No rushed movements. It was simply an ordinary woman beginning an ordinary workday that somehow never reached its destination. He disliked mysteries that looked ordinary. They were almost always the most carefully hidden. A soft knock interrupted the silence. One of the housekeepers stepped inside. "Sir, Lily is awake," Adrian nodded and walked toward the breakfast room overlooking the east garden. Morning light reflected across the glass walls where Lily sat at an oversized table with a bowl of pancakes, fresh strawberries, and orange juice placed neatly in front of her. She stared at the food without taking a single bite. Adrian quietly pulled out the chair across from her. "You do not like pancakes?" he asked. Lily looked down at her hands. "Mommy always made the first one look funny on purpose." Adrian waited. "Sometimes it looked like a dinosaur. Sometimes it looked like a rabbit. She said breakfast should make people smile before the day starts." For a moment neither of them spoke. Adrian reached toward the serving plate, picked up another pancake, and awkwardly folded one side over. The result looked nothing like an animal. It barely resembled anything at all. Lily blinked before letting out the smallest laugh. It lasted only a second, but it was the first genuine sound of happiness anyone had heard from her since arriving. "That looks like a sleepy turtle," she whispered. Adrian almost smiled. "Then we will call it a turtle." As Lily finally began eating, Adrian noticed her backpack resting beside the chair. "May I look inside?" he asked. She nodded. Most of the contents were exactly what he expected from a 6-year-old. Colored pencils. 2 library books. A stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. A school notebook decorated with bright stickers. Beneath everything else rested a small spiral notebook wrapped inside a clear plastic bag. Adrian carefully opened it. Every page contained neat handwriting. Grocery lists. Cleaning schedules. Phone numbers. Nothing remarkable until the final pages. There, hidden between ordinary reminders, Emily had written several dates followed by brief observations. Black sedan outside building again. Storage room light on after. Midnight. Same unfamiliar man entering executive hallway. Adrian's eyes narrowed. They were not accusations. They were quiet observations made by someone who noticed details because her job required her to remain invisible. Then one sentence stood alone at the bottom of the last page. "If anything happens to me, the answer is behind the black wolf." Adrian slowly closed the notebook. He understood something in that moment that none of his investigators had yet realized. Emily had never intended to become part of anyone's secrets. She had simply paid attention when everyone assumed the maid would never be looking. Somewhere inside his own world, an ordinary woman had seen something extraordinary. And before disappearing, she had left him the only map she believed he would know how to read. Adrian had learned long ago that the smallest details usually carried the greatest truth. Expensive watches, polished speeches, and carefully written reports could all be manufactured. Habits could not. Emily's notebook was filled with habits. Every observation was brief, unemotional, and precise, exactly the way someone recorded information without realizing it might one day matter. He carried the notebook into his private office while his security team quietly gathered around the conference table. Nobody interrupted the silence. They all recognized the expression on Adrian's face. He had stopped searching for a missing employee. He had started investigating his own house. "Show me every security recording from the executive hallway during the last 30 days, he said. The room immediately came alive. Screens illuminated one after another, displaying endless hours of ordinary activity. Executives arrived for meetings. Housekeepers pushed cleaning carts through polished corridors. Delivery staff entered with flowers and catering trays. Everything appeared routine until Adrian noticed something strange. Every evening shortly after 9 o'clock, one particular camera froze for exactly 43 seconds before resuming normally. 43 seconds. Not enough for anyone to notice unless they were searching for it. "Run it again," Adrian said. The technician replayed the footage. The interruption happened every single night. Always the same duration. Always the same camera. Adrian folded his arms. "Equipment does not fail with perfect timing." His chief of security nodded slowly. "Someone programmed it." Adrian's eyes drifted back toward Emily's notebook. Storage room light on after midnight. Same unfamiliar man entering executive hallway. She had not understood what she was seeing. She had simply noticed patterns because cleaning the mansion required walking those hallways every evening. While executives ignored the maintenance corridors, Emily had quietly passed through them carrying fresh towels and cleaning supplies, seeing everything without becoming part of anything. Another report arrived moments later. The black sedan Emily mentioned had been identified through nearby traffic cameras. The license plate belonged to a property management company with no obvious connection to Adrian's organization. Yet the same vehicle had appeared outside 3 different buildings owned by his companies over the past 6 weeks. It never stayed longer than 15 minutes. It never received parking tickets. It blended into the city by looking completely ordinary. Adrian stared at the photographs spread across the table. Someone had spent weeks moving quietly through the edges of his empire. Emily had simply been the first person humble enough to notice because nobody ever paid attention to the maid carrying a mop bucket down the hallway. A soft knock interrupted the meeting. Lily stood hesitantly in the doorway holding the stuffed rabbit from her backpack. One of the housekeepers had tried convincing her to stay upstairs, but she quietly walked past everyone until she reached Adrian. "May I ask you something?" she whispered. Adrian lowered himself to one knee so they were nearly eye level. "Of course." Lily looked down at the rabbit before speaking again. "If Mommy was scared, would she still think about me?" Adrian did not answer immediately. He remembered his own childhood, when promises often mattered more than certainty. "Every minute," he finally replied. "Some people keep breathing because they have someone waiting for them." Lily nodded as though she had expected exactly that answer. Then she reached into the rabbit's tiny pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I forgot this was here." Adrian carefully unfolded it. It was a child's drawing made with bright crayons. Emily stood holding Lily's hand beneath a blue sky. Beside them was a tall man wearing a dark suit. Above his head, drawn in careful black marker, was the shape of a wolf. On the back, written in Emily's unmistakable handwriting, were only 6 words. "Trust no one already inside the house." The conference room became completely silent. Adrian slowly folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The danger had never been approaching from outside his world. It had been quietly waiting within it all along. By late afternoon, the mansion no longer felt like a home. It had become a place where every hallway carried unanswered questions. Adrian ordered access to every room, every storage area, and every maintenance tunnel beneath the estate. Nobody objected. Nobody even looked surprised. The command itself revealed how seriously he had begun taking Emily's disappearance. If someone inside his own organization had hidden the truth, then every locked door had become a possibility. Hour after hour the search uncovered nothing except ordinary supplies, archived records, and empty corridors that smelled faintly of fresh paint and old stone. Yet Adrian refused to believe Emily's final message had been wrong. She had trusted him without ever truly knowing him. That kind of trust deserved to be answered. As evening settled over Manhattan, another report arrived from the technology team. The mysterious black sedan had traveled to an abandoned commercial district on the west side of the city twice during the previous month. Most of the warehouses there had been vacant for years after shipping companies moved their operations farther north. The buildings attracted almost no attention because nothing appeared to happen there anymore. Adrian studied the satellite photographs spread across the table. One warehouse still received electricity despite having no registered tenants. Water usage remained unusually consistent. Deliveries appeared twice each week under the name of a maintenance contractor that officially did not exist. Too many ordinary details had gathered in one forgotten place. "Prepare the vehicles," Adrian said quietly. "No unnecessary attention. We are going to verify, not announce ourselves." Less than 30 minutes later 3 black sport utility vehicles rolled silently through streets glowing beneath rows of amber streetlights. Rainwater reflected the city skyline like broken glass across the pavement, while Adrian sat in the rear seat, Emily's notebook resting on his lap. He read the final pages again and again until one sentence suddenly felt different. "Storage room light on after midnight." She had not written warehouse. She had written storage room. Somewhere in her mind, the abandoned building had simply looked like another place where supplies were kept. She had never imagined it could be anything more. The convoy stopped 2 blocks away. Adrian stepped onto the sidewalk, breathing the cool evening air. The neighborhood was almost silent except for the distant rumble of a passing subway train. One warehouse stood darker than the others, but a faint line of warm light escaped beneath a side door that should have been locked. Adrian raised one hand, signaling everyone else to remain behind. He preferred certainty before action. Moving quietly along the brick wall, he reached a dusty window covered by years of grime. Most of the glass had become impossible to see through, but one corner had been wiped clean from the inside. Adrian leaned slightly closer. His heartbeat slowed instead of quickened. Calm had always sharpened his judgment. Inside, a single lamp illuminated rows of stacked boxes and folding tables. Near the far wall sat a woman wrapped in a gray blanket, reading from a children's storybook with a quiet smile despite the exhaustion on her face. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. The same face from the personnel file. Emily Carter. She was alive. Adrian closed his eyes for one brief second, not from relief alone but because Lily's voice echoed inside his memory. My mommy has been missing for 3 days. She had not been wrong. Emily had disappeared from the world, yet somehow she had not stopped believing someone would eventually find her. Adrian stepped back from the window and looked toward his team. For the first time since this search began, certainty replaced every unanswered question. Emily had survived. Now the only mystery left was why someone had gone to such extraordinary lengths to hide an ordinary maid instead of simply letting her return home to the little girl who was still waiting for her. Adrian did not rush toward the warehouse door. Impatience solved very few problems, and tonight every answer mattered more than speed. He watched through the dusty window for another full minute. Emily turned another page of the children's book, her voice too soft to hear through the glass, but her expression revealed something unexpected. She was not frightened. She was waiting. Waiting with the quiet patience of someone who believed the right moment had not arrived yet. 2 elderly women sat nearby drinking tea while a teenage boy sorted canned food onto wooden shelves. Nothing about the scene resembled the prison Adrian had imagined. This does not make sense, his chief of security whispered. Adrian nodded once. Exactly. He walked to the front entrance and knocked 3 times. The sound echoed through the old building. Seconds later the door slowly opened. An older woman with silver hair and gentle eyes looked at Adrian without surprise. She simply stepped aside. She told us you would come, the woman said calmly. Adrian entered, his team remaining outside as instructed. Emily stood so quickly that the storybook slipped from her hands onto the table. For several seconds neither of them spoke. She looked exhausted, the faint shadows beneath her blue eyes revealing days without proper rest, but she was unharmed. More importantly, she looked relieved instead of afraid. Your daughter is safe, Adrian said first. The tension left Emily's shoulders so suddenly she had to grip the back of a chair to steady herself. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she smiled. Thank you, she whispered. That was the only thing I could not protect. Adrian looked around the room. Blankets, donated clothing, canned food. Children's drawings taped to the walls. It was not a hideout. It was a shelter. Why are you here? He asked. Emily took a slow breath before answering. Because leaving would have placed Lily in danger. Adrian frowned. Explain. Emily reached into her shoulder bag and carefully removed a small flash drive wrapped inside a folded handkerchief. 3 days ago I finished cleaning the executive conference hallway. I stayed a little longer because I heard someone arguing behind a closed door. I was about to leave when this fell onto the floor outside the room. She placed the flash drive into Adrian's hand. I picked it up because I thought it belonged to one of your executives. Before I could return it, I heard someone say that if the information inside disappeared, years of planning would disappear with it. Adrian remained silent. Emily continued. I realized they were not looking for a missing employee. They were looking for this. She looked toward the older woman standing quietly by the doorway. Mrs. Harper runs this shelter. My mother volunteered here when I was little. I came because nobody connected this place to me anymore. Adrian turned the flash drive over between his fingers. Why did you not contact me? Emily gave a tired smile. Because I did not know who I could trust. Her words lingered heavily in the quiet room. The notebook was my insurance. The key was my backup plan. Lily knew exactly what to do if I did not come home. Adrian looked at her for a long moment before asking the question that mattered most. Do you know whose flash drive this is? Emily slowly shook her head. No. But I remember one thing very clearly. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, replaying the memory. The voice giving orders was familiar. I had heard it many times inside your mansion. Not from a visitor. Not from a stranger. From someone everyone respected. Adrian's expression remained controlled, but something inside him shifted. The greatest threat had never been hidden in the streets of Manhattan. It had been sitting comfortably at his own table, speaking with the confidence of a man who believed loyalty would never be questioned. The drive felt surprisingly light in Adrian's hand, as though something so small should not have carried the weight of so many unanswered questions. He slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket without looking away from Emily. You and Lily are coming back with me, he said quietly. Emily hesitated. If the wrong people see me return, they will know the drive is still safe. Adrian gave a calm nod. Then they will make their next move, and I will finally know who they are. Emily searched his face for several long seconds. She had spent almost a year cleaning the halls of his estate, watching him pass through rooms surrounded by executives and advisors. He had never once noticed her. Tonight, for the first time, she saw something entirely different. He was not speaking like a powerful businessman protecting his reputation. He was speaking like a man who intended to keep a promise he had made to a frightened little girl. The drive back to the estate was unusually quiet. Emily sat in the rear seat staring through rain-speckled windows as familiar streets drifted past. Every block brought her closer to the place she had deliberately avoided for 3 days. Adrian noticed her hands folded tightly together. You are thinking about Lily, he said. Emily smiled faintly. I have thought about nothing else. She has been brave. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. She always tries to be brave when she is scared. She learned that from me. Adrian looked out toward the passing skyline. She came to my door alone. Emily lowered her head, emotion softening her voice. Because I told her that if I disappeared, she must find the man with the black wolf. Years ago my mother told me the symbol belonged to someone who never forgot a promise. Adrian remained silent. He had not heard those words in decades. By the time the vehicles reached the estate, evening had settled across the gardens. The mansion looked exactly as it always had, elegant and peaceful beneath rows of warm lights. Yet Adrian no longer saw marble floors or expensive architecture. He saw a place where trust had quietly begun to disappear. Inside, Lily was sitting on the library rug surrounded by coloring books. The moment she heard footsteps, she looked toward the doorway. Her eyes widened. Mommy! She cried. Emily dropped to her knees just as Lily threw her small arms around her neck. Either of them spoke for several moments. They simply held each other, as though making up for every hour they had been apart. Housekeepers standing nearby quietly wiped tears from their eyes before slipping out of the room. Adrian remained by the doorway, giving them the privacy they deserved. Watching mother and daughter together stirred something unfamiliar inside him, something no business victory or carefully negotiated agreement had ever produced. Family was not measured by blood alone. Sometimes it was measured by the people you refused to abandon. The reunion ended only when Emily gently kissed Lily's forehead and promised she would not leave again without telling her first. Lily looked toward Adrian with a grateful smile that belonged only to children who believed kindness should always be acknowledged. Thank you for finding her, she whispered. Adrian inclined his head. Your mother never stopped finding her way back to you. Before anyone could say another word, Adrian's chief of security entered carrying a tablet. His expression had changed completely. "Sir, we examined the contents of the flash drive." Adrian accepted the device without speaking. "The files were encrypted," the chief continued, "but one folder opened automatically." Adrian studied the screen. It contained photographs, financial records, property transfers, and meeting schedules spanning several years. At the top of every document appeared the same authorization signature. His heartbeat slowed instead of quickened. He recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to Victor Ashford, the senior advisor who had served beside Adrian's late father, the man who had helped raise him, guided him, and earned the complete trust of everyone inside the organization. Emily looked at Adrian's face and understood the truth before he spoke a single word. The person she had accidentally overheard had never been hiding in the shadows. He had been standing beside Adrian all along. Adrian did not confront Victor Ashford. That night, men who believed they had never been discovered often revealed far more than those who were cornered too quickly. Instead, he quietly ordered that nothing inside the mansion change. Meetings continued. Staff followed their normal schedules. Lights turned off at their usual hour. Every routine remained untouched, giving the illusion that the secret hidden inside the flash drive still belonged only to the people who had created it. Victor arrived the following morning wearing the same tailored charcoal suit he had worn every Monday for nearly 20 years. He greeted employees by name, complimented the gardeners on the roses near the fountain, and walked into Adrian's office carrying a leather portfolio as though it were any ordinary business day. "Good morning," Victor said with his familiar warm smile. "I have the quarterly reports ready." Adrian looked up from his desk with the same calm expression he always carried. "Leave them there." Victor hesitated almost imperceptibly before placing the portfolio on the polished wood. "You seem distracted." Adrian folded his hands. "I have been thinking about loyalty." Victor smiled again. "That is a rare quality these days." Adrian simply nodded, allowing the silence to stretch until Victor excused himself and left the room. The moment the office door closed, Adrian's chief of security stepped from the adjoining conference room. "He believes nothing has changed," he whispered. "Good," Adrian replied. "Let him keep believing that." While investigators quietly examined every record connected to the encrypted files, Adrian made another decision that surprised nearly everyone in the mansion. Emily and Lily would remain as honored guests for as long as they needed. The East Garden suite was transformed into a comfortable home rather than temporary lodging. Fresh flowers appeared by the windows each morning. Lily's favorite books were placed beside her bed. Emily protested at first, insisting she could return to her small apartment once everything settled. Adrian shook his head. "Not until I know you are truly safe." Emily looked around the elegant room before answering. "You barely knew my name a week ago." Adrian allowed himself the smallest smile. "That was my mistake, not yours." Over the next several days, the atmosphere inside the mansion changed in ways nobody expected. Lily's laughter drifted through hallways that had once echoed only with quiet footsteps and formal conversations. She convinced several security guards to play hide-and-seek in the gardens after lunch. She left colorful crayon drawings on refrigerators, office doors, and even beside Adrian's library chair. Nobody dared remove them. Emily began helping the kitchen staff prepare breakfast, not because anyone asked her to, but because caring for people had always come naturally. One morning Adrian entered the dining room to find a plate waiting beside his coffee. The pancake on top had been folded into the unmistakable shape of a sleepy turtle. He looked toward Emily. She smiled knowingly. "Lily said breakfast should make people smile before the day starts." Adrian stared at the pancake for several quiet seconds before letting out a soft laugh that surprised even himself. The sound drew Lily running into the room. "See?" she said proudly. "Mommy told you." Emily watched the exchange with gentle disbelief. The man whose name caused powerful executives to lower their voices was patiently listening to a 6-year-old explain why turtles were underrated animals. Somewhere between searching for a missing maid and keeping a promise to her daughter, Adrian had begun rediscovering parts of himself that ambition had quietly buried years ago. Yet beneath the warmth slowly filling the mansion, another truth continued waiting. The investigation into Victor Ashford had uncovered far more than hidden financial records. It revealed years of carefully planned deception woven so deeply into the organization that exposing it would change every relationship Adrian believed he understood. And for the first time in his life, he realized protecting his empire would not require becoming more ruthless. It would require becoming worthy of the trust a frightened little girl had placed in him on a rainy night when she knocked on the only door she believed would open. The first clear morning arrived almost a week after Lily had knocked on Adrian's door. Sunlight poured through the mansion windows, warming the marble floors that had once felt cold no matter the season. The gardens outside had begun to bloom again, and the sound of birds replaced the endless rhythm of rain that seemed to have followed every painful moment of the past few days. Adrian stood alone on the terrace holding a cup of black coffee, watching gardeners trim the hedges with quiet precision. His chief of security approached with a single folder. "Everything has been completed," he said. Adrian accepted it without opening the cover. The investigation had uncovered every hidden account, every falsified report, and every carefully disguised decision that Victor Ashford had buried over the years. The authorities had received the evidence through the proper legal channels, allowing the truth to surface without placing innocent people in danger. The organization itself would survive, but it would never operate the same way again. Adrian handed the folder back. "Archive it." His chief looked surprised. "You do not want to review the final report?" Adrian slowly shook his head. "I already know everything I need to know." Some victories did not require revisiting old disappointments. Some chapters deserved to remain closed. Later that afternoon, Emily found Adrian walking through the east garden where Lily chased butterflies with the same faded teddy bear tucked beneath one arm. The little girl laughed every time she came close enough to almost catch one before letting it fly away again. Emily stopped beside Adrian beneath the shade of an old maple tree. "The apartment manager called this morning," she said softly. "Everything is still there. We can move back whenever we are ready." Adrian kept watching Lily. "Do you want to?" Emily was quiet for a long moment. "I thought I did." She smiled as Lily waved excitedly from across the lawn. "But something feels different now." Adrian finally turned toward her. "Different can be frightening." Emily nodded. "Sometimes. Sometimes it feels like peace." Before either of them could say anything else, Lily came running across the grass, slightly out of breath but smiling so brightly that the entire garden seemed warmer because of it. She slipped one hand into Emily's and the other into Adrian's without asking permission. "Can we plant another tree?" she asked. Adrian looked down at her. "Another?" Lily pointed toward a young oak standing near the stone wall. "That one was here before us. I think every family should plant one together." Emily's eyes filled with quiet emotion. Adrian looked across the gardens, imagining years passing beneath branches that did not yet exist. "I think that is an excellent idea," he answered. By sunset, a small maple sapling stood in freshly turned soil overlooking the gardens where Lily carefully poured the first watering can over its roots. She stepped back proudly, dirt covering the knees of her jeans and the tips of her sneakers. "Now it can grow with us," she declared. Adrian smiled. "Yes, it can." As the evening breeze gently stirred the new leaves, Lily looked up at him with complete innocence. "Do you know what Mommy says?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "What does she say?" Lily grinned. "She says home is wherever people keep their promises." Adrian glanced toward Emily. Neither of them spoke because no words were necessary. The frightened little girl who had once stood alone in the rain had found more than the person she was searching for. She had reminded a man who possessed wealth, influence, and power that none of those things meant anything without someone to protect, someone to trust, and someone waiting for you at the end of the day. Sometimes the strongest walls are not built from stone. They are built from kindness remembered, promises kept, and the quiet courage of a child who believed that one honest knock on the right door could change every life behind it.